Welcome to this podcast number 3, and this one is going to be in English, guys, as I've got the pleasure to be here, received in London by a former colleague of mine, Lamar Joseph. So thank you very much for your time, Lamar.
Appreciate it, thank you, and welcome back to London.
Thank you, with the sun.
Of course, sun and beautiful view, so we're just reminding you why you miss it. So maybe this might, we might get you back, who knows.
I'll come back next year for sure.
Of course.
So let's get started. First of all, tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do actually.
Of course, so my name is Lamar Joseph. So I am a wealth manager with St. James's Place, but I work for a particular company called Bradbys Wealth Management. Bradbys Wealth Management is a representative of St. James's Place, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So the work that I do is regulated, and it pertains around wealth management and financial advice. And that's mostly to anyone who's working, so it can start from somebody who's just come out of university and they've either had inheritance or they've started working, all the way up to those who are ready to retire or in their retirement. So it covers everyone at their different life stages, and we're here to help them and provide them with the right advice to get them to move forward. So yeah.
And all of this in serious, that's why he's wearing the nice pinstripe suit, so obviously you get the trust.
Of course, we have Parisians in the building, so I thought I might add a bit of elegance to the table today.
I'll leave a card.
Of course.
We met at Foxtons actually, so tell us a bit more about the Big F. How was it to work at Foxtons?
It was a good learning experience. It was for me actually, it was a sales university. Working at Foxtons, I found it was literally like going to university, but for sales, dedicated within the environment, and it was very practical, very intense. The first year and a half, I felt like I was not even on autopilot. It was bizarre because you're learning so much. The environment is constantly moving. You never feel like you've learned enough. It's a constant battle. Plus, you're seeing people do really well that have been there for a bit longer. So it's a journey. But one thing that I loved about it is that you learn about yourself. You see how you improve, and actually you start to believe in yourself a little bit more. And you also understand and start to appreciate that you can't control everything. So you just become really good at what you can do, and then you accept that everything else is going to be up to whatever happens. But as long as you do your process to the best you can, the chances of you getting the outcome you want is higher. Not guaranteed, but higher. But yeah, it was good. It was a learning experience. Plus, I grew up in London as well, so it's for me it was interesting having grown up in the city to then working in similar areas that I'd used to be around. But now I'm actually working as an agent, particularly where I live in Notting Hill, and being an agent there, it was interesting to see it from a different perspective, but also the same. So yeah, that's it.
And I feel like Foxtons is a proper Londonish company.
It is.
It's very fast-paced and.
Very. It's a heavy London brand. It's the most prominent estate agent that is visibly recognisable because of course they have the famous green minis that are flying all around the place. Well, driving, but of course, because you don't want to be flying those minis, you'll be in big trouble. But
maybe later, but not now.
Not soon, so we'll get there. Maybe not Elon Musk, maybe somebody else. But no, all jokes aside, yeah. So that's kind of where it is. How was it for you actually?
It was great. It was another country anyway, a different way of doing real estate, and that's where I learned real estate. So I came from a blank page, and it was amazing because first of all I managed to drive a car in London, which was very new, crossing all of those streets, improving my sales skills as well, as I had a background selling suits and furniture back in France, and here selling properties was just the top level for me. But what made the main difference was the passion that gave me all those managers, because I think that with all those working hours, 8 to 8 every day, plus weekends, you're just doing this was like it was like almost all my life at a time. So obviously you improve because you practice. And as you said, you learn a lot about failure as well.
Yes.
Something you can't control, you just move on. And you progress step by step.
Correct.
So I learned a lot. Yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of people that came into Foxtons either came out of university or were working in different industries. So I used to work in hospitality, so I was working in a restaurant, and not different because restaurant is still customer service, especially fine dining restaurant as well. It's very focused on customer service, the customer experience, and actually a lot of that is relatable to Foxtons. It's the experience of the applicant, it's the experience of the person who's renting, the experience of the landlord, and ultimately the service that you give them as well, and what you deliver. So yeah, there was a transition. It's just Foxtons, at least when I first joined, it was a good transition from not having to work late at night to then actually being able to at least have some weekends off. But then I think after you stay there for a few years, you're like, oof, actually I'd like to have Saturdays off as well. So I'm in a position now where I can take Saturdays off, although I'm in a different position where if I want to work I can, but it's not the obligation. It's the difference. So yeah.
And so now, as you put the pinstripe suit on and you stepped up, what kind of service do you offer here at Bradbys?
Yeah, so it's financial advice, or as I said, wealth management, and the three main pillars that it covers is going to be protection. So protection can cover either protecting, insuring, let's say your life, for example, if the worst case scenario was to happen, and you have a family, or you have, let's say, a mortgage outstanding, and you want to protect that. So I think in this day and age, I'm going to come on to the second part, I think it's important to increase awareness in terms of protecting your existing assets and what you have, and also not just your assets, protecting yourself. We have insurance for our car, we have insurance for our phone, we have insurance for our house, but guess what? A lot of people miss out insuring themselves. Second one is, if anything happens to you and you're no longer working, or not no longer working, I take that back, but if you're in a position where you're not able to work because you're ill for unfortunate reason, or you're injured and you can't perform your work, then there's protection policies available there to cover certain scenarios. Of course, all of this mostly is, generally speaking, under application, so there will be some review process of your medical history, but it's just to give an understanding that protection is very important, because if the worst and unforeseeable happens, then you don't have to worry about running into your savings straight away. You actually have a solution there that was already pre-planned, and it gives you peace of mind, and actually probably a better route to recovery as well, because the last thing you want to stress about if you have a major accident or something is money. So that's the insurance side of it. The next is going to be, I guess you can call it kind of cash and savings. So that's just general cash. It could be with mortgages. Now, I don't personally deal with mortgages directly. However, in this job as working as a financial advisor or a wealth manager, is you work with a lot of different professionals in different industries. So you work with accountants, you work with estate agents, you'll work with those who write wills and trusts. So you'll have different people that you can call upon, that are professionals who also have similar relationships with their clients in their profession. So that's kind of those areas that we cover. And then finally, which is the juicy part of what we do, where not everyone, but the most attractive part is the investments. So that can be investing in your individual savings account, which has tax-free wrappers, investing for your pension, and it can also cover as well having your estate ready in terms of what you own, all of the assets you own, and being able to potentially have a plan for you to be able to pass those on to, let's say, your kids and your family, so that you can reduce or mitigate your inheritance tax if or when that may be due in the future. So that's what we do.
And so what do you prefer working on?
It's a good question. Initially, I would say investments, because investments was what I was doing myself for a long time. I would say now, I've started to understand a little bit better to do with pensions and protection. Pensions is a good way because you can't access the funds until you're at least from April 2027, 57. So there's a bit of a long-term horizon, but also it's not just that you're putting money away, is that you're actively thinking about what kind of life do I want to live in the future. So if I asked you a question actually, what would you want to do when you retire? What's your answer?
I'm not sure I want to retire.
Someday you're going to not have to, but what would be your ideal retirement then? And I can maybe give you an example to help you and see if you've maybe thought about it, but.
I think maybe like my parents. My parents, they have a nice countryside house. Yeah. They just bought a caravan. Yeah. Planning all those trips around the world with the caravan. I think this could be a nice option.
Okay, fair.
But since I launched my business a year and a half ago, this seems way too far, way too unpredictable. And I think since I launched my own business, I don't look at the future in the same way.
Of course. How do you look at the future now? Because it's quite interesting, because your situation is quite similar to a lot of clients that I deal with already. So it's quite interesting to hear. What would you say that you think about now?
I think the future is tomorrow. The future is tomorrow. The future is in 2 hours.
Yeah.
While before working for someone else, the future was in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah.
Now the future is way closer. And I want to grab all this future step by step instead of looking way further.
Okay.
But I'm going to jump back on what you said, because since January, I registered to what we call a prévoyance in French, which is basically what you said, because I'm running around Paris with my motorbike, and obviously if there is a problem, I can't work for a few months, few days. I think it would be great to have this discussion, this backup plan, to help me keep working, going on with my life, while I can't be as active as I was before. So yeah, I think it's very important to think about that. But in terms of pension and retirement, that's way too far. We'll treat that maybe next year.
Okay, fair.
I'll have another answer.
No worries, that's absolutely fine. It's all good. And it's interesting because different people at different stages will consider different things, and depending on what they're doing as well.
Definitely,
so I find with business owners or those who are just starting their business, the priority actually is almost, it's fight or flight mode. It's, I need to make this work now, let's make it happen. What's happening in 10 years' time isn't a concern to me. And it's good because you've got an understanding, okay, this is where I need to go now. It's my not caution, but my pointer note or recommendation, or just as a little kind of voice in the background to say, just have it in the back of your mind that eventually, maybe in a year or two, you can start to plan towards it once you get to a safe space. But I think the first priority is getting to that space where it's like, okay, I can at least breathe for a bit and start to understand what's going around, because what may happen is you may stay in that mode for 5, 10, 15 years.
Definitely, yeah.
And then before you know it, oh, I'm retiring in 5 years. It's like, now. So it's always just something there. But then again, it's part of the process. So everyone's journey is different, and there's no, oh, you must plan for retirement at age 18, because again, it's a step by step, and it needs to be for you, not for anybody else. It needs to work for you, and that's how it works when it comes to financial advice. It's not, oh, I need to fit in the box that everybody else is. It needs to be, this box is for you. Let's make it how it needs to be for your future. So, yeah.
And would you say people come straight to you, or you do marketing? How do you get your customers?
Good question. So, I work with a firm, so Bradbys Wealth Management.
Yeah.
So they run like LinkedIn campaigns. So there are people that come through. We also do events as well. So we previously used to go to golf events in the UK. And just so you're aware, we do only advise clients who are based in the UK or paying tax here. So unfortunately, I can't advise you being a Parisian. If that changes in the future, I'll let you know straight away. Or if you move back to London and you want to pay tax here.
I need a visa now. It's harder. I have to leave. In 2 days I have to leave.
I know how it is. So there's that, but of course, again, those are kind of the ways. And then, as with any real business, when you're starting up, it's going to be word of mouth. And of course, at this moment in time, I don't know when you're going to upload this, but I may have or will be starting to do my own videos as well, where I'll be talking in front of the camera. And it will be subjects related to previous experience working as a lettings agent, and also some areas of my understanding of the property market. However, because I'm not active, it will be more kind of tips of what I've picked up over the years. So just to pass it on, because I feel like, I really enjoyed that experience. I learned a lot. So I'm happy to put that information and experience in the public domain, but then primarily moving it into more so financial awareness, which I think is a growing space online, which is one of the questions I put in at the end. So I won't go into too much into that. But yeah, that's me.
So you've got 1 follower already.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So you jump back on Foxtons. What would you say? How would you say your Foxtons experience helped you in your current job?
It's a good question. So I would say it's dealing with everybody's situation and letting them understand that I'm here to help. I'm here to help them with their situation, and I'm not here to force them to make a decision. And I think that still related to Foxtons. So at Foxtons, somebody comes to you, they call, I've seen this property, I want to see it straight now. Great. What are you looking for? Like, when do you need to move? And I want to understand.
When do you need it? Yeah, that's the question. When do you need it?
Exactly. When do you need it? What's the reason that you're moving? Because for me, it's. I know you've made an inquiry and you've seen this property, and actually you want it to be the one that you take straight away. But I know on the back end that property may have multiple offers. It may be available, or it may not look as attractive on the picture, or it may look even better in person. However, understanding that I can't control everything, somebody else could get there quicker. So even if I pick up the phone and tell you come and see me at 5 o'clock today, you could come and see me at 5 o'clock today, but at 3 o'clock somebody else took it off the market. And then at 5 o'clock I call you and say, oh sorry, we're outside but somebody's just taken it, why did you waste my time? So going back to that, it's slowing down the process and understanding what do I need to do to help you find what you're looking for, or to give you the best advice. And what I mean by best advice is if you come to me and say, right, Lamar, the reason why I'm moving is because I want to see if I can get a better deal. Okay, so what do you have now? I have a 2-bedroom, I pay £500 a week, it's in South Kensington, it's on the first floor, my landlord's amazing, but I just want to see if I can get a better deal because I've been living here for 7 years. Okay, great. I can tell you what's on the market now, and I can comfortably tell you if we bring your property onto the market now, you'll probably be paying about £850 a week. So if you want to serve notice, it's going to be very expensive and you're probably going to get half the size, but it's up to you. And for me, I think it's important to give upfront advice because ultimately in this, and the perfect thing when it came to property or working in Foxtons, and now what's translated to this is you can't sell somebody something. You can advise them, but you can't sell them. It's not a product. It's not like, oh, here's a new like lotion I bought, here's a new device, try it out, buy it for £20. It's not like I said, you're really advising somebody to commit to something that needs to make sense and ultimately will impact their lives. So I think for this, moving into this, actually, it was a smooth transition because all I went from doing is now is advising somebody on how to get the property they love, or how we can find a tenant and generate income for them so that they can have a stress-free process in handling or owning a property. So we're bringing two wants and needs together. Of course, compromise always sits in the middle, as you remember correctly. It's never this landlord wants this and this tenant wants this. It's always the battle in between, but eventually we bring an agreement if we can, and then we go from there. With this, it's somewhat similar, although the agreement is not you having to battle with other people, but actually it's partly yourself. In the futures, do you want to invest that £1,000 today? Do you want to put it in your pension? Do you want to take out a protection policy? Or do you want to maybe go on holiday or go out to to an expensive dinner for £1,000? There's that balance. Now, I don't go through people's bank statements and tick every single transaction because I think my eyes would see too much. But nevertheless, that's where it comes down to. So yeah.
And do you work with companies as well, or only private clients?
So we do work with companies. So when we're working with companies, it can be if we're helping them set up like a group pension scheme. But it can also be advising companies as well if it's, let's say, for example, a company that wants to have an arm that has, let's say, holdings of assets, of investments as well. We can advise in those areas. But I would say the vast majority tend to be private clients. So.
Perfect. And talking about maybe my favorite topic in the world, real estate.
Of course.
Tell me a bit more about the UK real estate market at the moment, how it is.
It's a good question. Now, I left we're filming this now in the start of March 2025. I left November 2024. So I can give you what I've understood up until that point, because everything beyond is, I guess, just the statistics that I'm reading through the press, which they still hold some weight, but I think, as you remember, what's reported and then what's actually on the ground in each individual area is always different.
There's a delay.
Always a delay. So with that being said, I would say for me at the moment, I think the main activity that I've seen in the sales market has been from first-time buyers. The reason why that is because there's been changes in stamp duty that were announced in our autumn budget last year, so I think end of October, which means that the stamp duty, or when you start paying stamp duty as a first-time buyer, but also when you start paying stamp duty, is going to increase from if I'm correct, it's April this year. Yeah, so from April. So from the new tax year. When it comes to even that time, there was also an increase, which was the same day. So I think it was announced on Thursday. That same day at the time of the autumn budget, there was an increase in the surcharge that you pay when you're buying additional properties. So that increased by, increased by an additional 2%. So yeah, that's for essentially buyers of buy-to-lets or foreign buyers, depending on what they own. But if it's beyond your first home, then you have to pay the surcharge. You worked in sales for a little bit here, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think at that time it was only a 3% surcharge for stamp duty. So it's things have changed. But I would say at the moment the market it's steady. I don't know how much activity there is in terms of the whole of London or the whole of UK, because I think everywhere has its own performance metrics. But where I was working, there was still activity in terms of some cash buyers, but those were normally ones who were quite experienced in areas. And I would say predominantly developers, but not just developers to develop and sell, but they would buy to rent out, so almost private rental sector. So those who might buy, they might buy a few units, or they might buy an entire residential building, but what they'll do is they'll convert that and then they'll turn it into either studios or one bedrooms, and they may put some on Airbnb and have some in tenancies, but they'll have it as a mixed private rental, because their time horizon is, even if the market might be a bit challenging today to sell, actually in 10, 20 years time, which is when we want to realise our investment, we may be looking at better market conditions. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, London is London anyway.
It is.
And one of my other questions as well, since Brexit, did you saw a change in terms of buyers from abroad?
It's a good question. So I worked in lettings. So to some degree we would see the offset. Now here's what because I joined in 2017, and here's what I witnessed. When I joined in 2017, so it was around end of spring, early summer. So I joined, when we came, we had about 150 to 200 properties on the market per office in lettings. The reason why, 2016, yes, there was Brexit, but actually there was probably something more important in the market at the time, which was stamp duty. The stamp duty surcharge we were just speaking about, that was announced, I believe, to be taking effect in 2015. So what happened is, there was a lot of foreign buyers, in particular all cash buyers, who said, actually, I want to acquire as much properties as possible before this surcharge comes in, because then what I can do is potentially sell it in the future. So what ended up happening is a lot of people rushed to buy properties to avoid essentially getting taxed what potentially would be the value of buying one or two properties anyway. And then what they did is they ended up becoming accidental landlords, which is the term that was used a lot up until, you could call it, just after the pandemic. So there were tons of properties in the market. The rentals market was very stable. Pricing was reasonable. I mean, that's always subjective. Pricing was reasonable. And then what happened is that, there was just a general influx. There wasn't a huge amount of movement. Tenants got relatively, you could say fair prices, but again, it's all subjective to the time of day or the time of year that you're looking at it at. But then what happened is COVID, or maybe not COVID, because I know sometimes YouTube blocks out. So 2020 happened, and then during 2020, this is where, of course, we went down into the situation that we did all over the world. A lot of people left London. What happened is, a lot of property owners at that time had then experienced, tenants have fled. Okay, now I've got a mortgage to pay. So with a limited pool of tenants available, landlords had to reduce their prices significantly in order to have some form of payment towards their mortgage. I know there were some mortgage holidays or some degree of support from the government, but it wasn't in its entirety. And again, this is what happened. So a lot of confidence was lost as a result, which is understandable, because if you own an asset, you've got a mortgage to pay, you've had a tenant, it's been paying its mortgage, it's self-sufficient, that's absolutely fine. And then you arrive to 2020 where I haven't even got a tenant at all, and there are barely any tenants out there, and I'm fighting with other landlords to get a tenant who wants to pay 50% rent, and that's a good deal. So it was almost the Wild West, and for tenants it was arguably probably one of the best times ever, because that was the cheapest rent you would see in decades. So,
you can sign a 3 years contract,
easy.
No problem.
They've all expired now. But I remember a few years ago they were still in place, and those are the people that it was really hard to bring back. That okay, the market has completely 180'd since then. That was a golden moment, and it might just go down in the history books, but I don't think we're going to relive it again. So that's where it was at. So what happened is the market, I wouldn't say it recovered, but what happened is we opened up, and then the Chancellor at the time announced a stamp duty holiday, and that caused a massive influx of buying and activity in the market. But what was interesting between that period was that a lot of properties prior, as I mentioned to you, there was a lot of, especially in London and particularly, owners who had multiple properties because they wanted to buy from before this first stamp duty. Yeah. What ended up happening is that they then sold those properties to owner occupiers. So the amount of stock that was available in the rentals market reduced. Home ownership was still at a great level, But each of those properties that used to be on the rental market were now being taken away one by one by owner occupiers, because it was previous renters who wanted to buy and had to wait for the market to reopen, now seized on the opportunity and took it. And bearing in mind, interest rates were also at good prices then as well. So, and then 2022, interest rates started to go up everywhere. It's not just here, they went up everywhere. They went up in France, they went up in the US, they went up in the EU, and they went up in Japan as well. So it was a correlated event.
How much was it, sorry to cut you, how much was it, the interest rate at the top here?
5.25%. In the ECB was about 4.75 or something, if I'm correct. Do you know how much it was in
France? We had a bit over 5, I think it was 5.05.
Fair.
I think it was the top, and now it's reduced a lot, so we're about 3.30, 3.35.
Oh wow, okay.
And a lot of people came back on the market since last spring.
Yeah.
And the market is still flowing at the moment, so pretty good. Mm-hmm. And spring is coming, which means more buyers. So I'm looking forward to see what the spring is gonna bring back in Paris.
Yeah.
And especially as last year we had the Olympics as well, so the market was a bit different.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how it's gonna be this year.
Fair. How was the Olympics?
Amazing.
Yeah.
We didn't win, but not too bad. Not too bad.
Actually, I mean, of course, he didn't win in total, but what was his name? The French swimmer,
Léon Marchand.
Léon Marchand.
Yeah, impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. Was it 4 gold medals?
I think it was 4. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very impressive. So.
And the vibe, the place, everything was really good. They did it really well, so.
It looked good. I didn't watch the opening ceremony. That's the only thing I didn't watch. But I watched some of the events. Some were a little bit funny. The highlight for me was the Turkish shooting, the competition.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, he was one-handed. But
yeah.
But because we had our Olympics in 2012 here.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't there.
No. I remember that 2012 Olympics here was it was just a very exciting time. But it comes and then it goes. But this is life. On to the next.
But I think it was a great spotlight for Paris.
Yeah.
To showcase the city, the place, all the surroundings.
Of course.
And I think it's going to be better as well for the real estate market, because with the Olympics in Paris, they brought 4 new tube lines. They're extending the city, kind of same as London.
Correct.
With all those new lines.
Correct.
Expanding the city, make it bigger, bringing more people in. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very positive for the future.
Yeah, I saw a few things that's happening in the Paris Metro. I think line 14 is one of them. I saw it goes all the way to the airport now, which is good.
Yeah, true.
Because before, when I used to go to Les Antilles or go to Martinique or Guadeloupe, I had to take an Uber, because taking the RERC is just forget it.
Very true.
Yeah. But now I've seen. I was like, okay, so next time I go, I know I can just take one direct route, so it's easy. So yeah, I go to Paris a lot. So.
That's a good commercial for France. Thank you very much. All right, so let's talk positive now. What are your growth plans here at Bradbys for this year?
Of course. So this year is my first official year. For me, it's actually just to familiarise myself with not just the role itself, but actually the different situation scenarios. It's quite similar to working as an agent. You just get to understand the different scenarios and outcomes, and then ultimately that gives way to being able to advise people better, because you understand certain situations, how to navigate them, and your past experiences and what those outcomes have been. So for me, this year is a learning experience, pure learning. I've set myself a target personally within that I want to achieve, but for me, it's a target where it's my first year, so I don't have anything else to base it off of. It's ambitious, but it's for me to not be complacent, because I'm not settling for complacency. That's just not applicable. But yeah, and that's pretty much it. From that onwards, then I will start looking at getting a higher qualification in what I do, so becoming specialised. That will take a few more years to do. But again, for me, it's I want to not just grow and earn. I want to learn and also be rewarded for that as well. So that's the journey ahead.
All right. So happy New Year, Lamar. Looks like you're going to be busy this year, right?
Very, very busy. Thank you very much.
And one of the things which is very important, I think, since we're doing this on social media, how do you think that the approach towards risk, investment, protection have changed since all those social media content?
It's a very good question. So, social media has opened an avenue of awareness that I'm not going to say wasn't there before, but if I look at, let's say, my parents' generation, for example, if you said to them investing, the most they probably would have heard of is maybe going to a bank branch and buying a bond at the bank, and that was it. Because in order for you to have access to a stockbroker, you would have to know somebody, you would have to have a minimum amount of money or capital to be able to invest. It was on the phone. It was quite well concealed from, if you want to call it, the general masses, and it was on a need-to-know basis. Whereas now, with the advent of platforms where you can invest yourself, they run adverts, you can see visually that actually I could invest in trading 212, Hargreaves Lansdown, and then subsequently from that it starts to grow. I think even funny enough, actually in France, there's a channel that I follow, Finale. So there is a gentleman called, what's his name? Mounir Lagoum. That's it. You may or may not have heard of him. I'll send you his channel. He's got an actual platform which is geared around investments, but also understanding and part of financial education, of course in French as well, which is massively helpful. But it's understanding general portfolio economics, what happens in the markets, and also having a platform to people to invest as well. And he has a book, so it's quite interesting. But that's not just with him in France. The same applies with here as well. There are different ways that you can engage and understand that actually I can invest my money, I can potentially see longer returns in the future. And I think that's where, that's one element of it. So I think the accessibility and the understanding has changed. So as a young person now, with the advent of having a phone in front of your hand, you can essentially see a lot more. And of course, if you want to look at it where we are in the world now, America is a shining beacon of what it looks like to invest. And when I say shining beacon, what I mean is that it's almost a cultural, inception to invest. A lot more household or percentage of households in the US invest. And I don't think it's the US is better or Europe is better or Asia or Africa is better. I think it's more just the understanding that actually some degree of risk has to be taken in order to see some growth in the future, because you have inflation. So even if you want to play it completely safe and keep all your cash that you earn and just save, in 10, 20, 30 years time, that cash won't be the same because inflation will reduce the value of it over time. So it's understanding that there are inflation forces, so how do I beat it? Well, I have to invest. When it comes to risk is interesting because risk is actually a concept where I think from, like I said, my parents' generation, risk is something that you don't take, or you take very little of. So you save all your money, you have a rainy day fund, and you avoid scams and you put it into property. Property was the safe haven, and it wasn't exclusive just to the UK, the US, I'm sure maybe even in Paris as well, and some other European countries, and Australia is a massive one. But I think home ownership is a big concept as well. In terms of people taking risks, there is those who are really cautious, but also it would be stupid for me not to mention that with social media, there is also the advent of people being able to promote, I'm not going to call it necessarily just scams, but...
That's what I was going to ask.
No, I was going to say, because they exist. Scams do exist, and scams have existed before social media. Yeah. So it's not exclusive to social media actually. And I think that's where an understanding of risk also comes from, because you've had scandals that have happened in the 90s, in the 2000s, 2010s, in the 80s, and it still happens today. It's just repackaged differently. And I think now it's just you're able to broadcast it much further. So this could be in other assets. But I think more so when it comes to it is ultimately the perception that you can get rich extremely quickly. Now, you can get lucky. How do you predict luck? There is no formula to it. If you get lucky and you become rich, great. However, what ends up happening is you invest £100 in, let's say, crypto, for example, and then in 1 year's time, you become a millionaire. Great. You start talking about it. What ends up happening is everybody else is now chasing that and ends up losing a lot more. So when you hear situations where people are putting their life savings because they saw a YouTuber or an influencer telling them that, I made so much money off of this and it's going to go to the moon, and then in reality those expectations aren't met, but now you're in a situation where you've risked all of your money, bad decision. If you've done a small portion where if you lose it and you're not in a position, then guess what? That's on you, but it's not going to have a severe detriment on your life. Whereas if you're doing it and actually you're putting too much money at risk, that's where the issue is. So I think there's a balance there where it's actually having a second thought and just stopping for a second, asking, what do I want to get out of this? Because yes, you could become a millionaire if you invest your whole life savings, but you could also be wiped out completely. And what would you do if the worst case scenario happens? So I'm not here necessarily just to stop people from getting into scams, although that is one element of what I do, but it's actually do things in stages, because ultimately the goal is to get to where you want to at some point. If you get there sooner, great. But if you get there eventually, that's more important, as opposed to you don't get there because you took such a decision before that it completely wipes you off the ladder, and then you have to start from ground zero much later in your life, because that's not a pleasant experience. So I would say, yeah, those are kind of the main aspects of it. What have you seen anything online that you've seen in terms of investing at all? What's your thoughts?
That's why I wanted to jump back on this, because I think that maybe all this easy content on social media, sometimes scams, as you said, might be just the first good approach to get people their first feet through the door and push them towards you, because they start to get interested, but they're scared. They're gonna get informations and then they're gonna jump back through your door. Bradbys, they're known. Let's talk to them, and that's the way you make them towards something more serious,
of course,
more clear as well. Because on social media, you just you eat what's on the table. We can't order. You can't go further.
Of course.
When you speak to someone specialized in that field, you can go deeper.
Absolutely. And I want to give good credit as well to social media, because there are some people who are online who are making incredible content that's opening up the space for people to think and be aware that actually there is more to my personal finances than just earning money, spending and saving, and actually there's more that I can utilize. So I think there are really good content creators as well that are actually creating thoughtful content and allowing people to see, oh, okay, so there's actually something else that could go on. And of course, I'm going to enter into this space at some point, so you're going to see me soon. Peut-être en français. And then we go from there. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Anyway, thank you very much, Lamar. It was great.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time, and see you next year for episode 2. See you later.
Take it easy.